This is blood histology. Here at the end of each of these little arrows we have platelets. These are our erythrocytes, and the erythrocytes have a biconcave shape, so in the middle of each one sometimes they appear white, and that's just because of the biconcave shape. The light is coming up through them, and there's not as much hemoglobin in the middle of each red blood cell, and so they just appear lighter. There's more hemoglobin around the edges. We also see a neutrophil in this slide. The neutrophils have segmented nuclei, so this is a very typical neutrophil, and it takes up red and blue stains equally, so it might have a very light purple lilac cytoplasm that you see here. Here we have a lymphocyte, and lymphocytes are rather small. Look at it in comparison to the erythrocyte shape and size. And the lymphocytes, their nucleus is a little granular, and it will take up almost the entire size and shape of the cell. We see just a little rim of cytoplasm around the edge of the cell. So that is our lymphocyte. On this slide we see two white blood cells. We see all the erythrocytes in the background, but we see a basophil, and the basophil it has a nucleus that's pretty much hidden by all of the dark staining granules, and these granules contain a lot of histamine that take up the blue dye, blue basic loving dye, so that's why we call this a basophil. That's a really nice example of a basophil. Here's an eosinophil, and the eosinophil has a bilobed nucleus, so here's one part of the nucleus and here's another one. This has a really funky shape in this slide, but that's okay. You should recognize it for the color. The granules inside the eosinophil, this is a granulocyte, as is the basophil, as is the neutrophil on the previous slide. This eosinophil, all of the granules in it take up eosin dyes, the red dyes. Now on this slide the color's not that great, but I see some platelets up here, and here's a platelet down here. Lots of erythrocytes with those pale centers because the hemoglobin is around the edges, and we do have some hemoglobin in here, and I see a lymphocyte with its nucleus, a little bit of cytoplasm, and I see another neutrophil just like on the first slide, and we're seeing another slide like this because neutrophils are the most abundant leukocyte and lymphocytes are the second most abundant white blood cell. So it's not very uncommon that if you get a slide you're going to see neutrophils and lymphocytes on them. So here we see that segmented nucleus that you can definitely say, oh, that's a neutrophil. What type of leukocyte is this? I hope you said, oh, that's a neutrophil because it has that segmented nucleus. And here we have more erythrocytes. And on this slide we have two of the same leukocyte. On this side, you see the red staining granules in there, so you should say, oh, that's definitely an eosinophil. Here's a platelet, by the way. And this is also an eosinophil, and I just show you these in comparison to really examine the shape of the nucleus. The eosinophil has a bilobed nucleus, and sometimes the nucleus looks a little tricky, so if the nucleus looks a little tricky, look at the granules. This looks like a monocyte nucleus. You're going to see monocytes on the next slide, but we can definitely tell it's an eosinophil because of the granules. Over here, this looks like an eosinophilic nucleus, but you can hardly see the red staining granules, so you're like, what is this? This wouldn't be the best specimen for a lab practical, so I probably wouldn't use it. But if you're like, what cell is this? It would be an eosinophil because of that nucleus. Now here are our monocytes. Monocytes are very large leukocytes, and they have a U-shaped nucleus. So here is a monocyte, and here we have a monocyte over here. And we have some platelets, and we have lots of erythrocytes in the back. Monocytes are very large with a U-shaped nucleus, and these are those cells that differentiate in the tissues, and we call them macrophages. And our last slide that we come to, this is a very short little presentation. We have lots of erythrocytes here, and these, notice how small they are. Large nucleus, small rim of cytoplasm around each. So yes, you got it. These are lymphocytes. Very good job. And we are done.